New places, new things, quests, seeing things you've never seen before. gameranx excitedly brings you 10 new adventure games in 2015. Number 10, Grim Fandango Remastered. Not exactly new, but definitely much closer to how Tim Schafer of Double Fine probably envisioned it when he created the game for LucasArts in 1998. At the time, the adventure game was actually somewhat in decline, and Grim Fandango was an attempt to revive the genre. Combining Aztec beliefs in afterlife with a film noir aesthetic, Grim Fandango is an incredibly interesting game and really worth your time, especially if you've never played it. Number 9, Firewatch. Firewatch follows the story of a volunteer fire lookout officer in the aftermath of the Yellowstone fires of 1988. Some mysterious occurrences go down, specifically people ransacking the player character Henry's tower while he was out on a routine patrol. Things seem as though they might get a little bit weirder, but we don't really know exactly a whole lot about the game yet. In fact, most of what we know about the game is very interesting ideas, but that actually makes me a lot more excited to play Firewatch. Number 8, Tales from the Borderlands. By now you have to have heard of Telltale Games. Their choice-based graphic adventure games have made a huge impact on how we look at adventure games, and Tales from the Borderlands is a great example. Tales does something that Telltale Games typically don't. It leans heavily on comedy. In fact, it's actually called a comedy video game. As you know, the writing for any Borderlands game is very good, and Telltale Games is fantastic at storytelling as well. So when you combine those two things, you have a formula for an episodic game that's going to last quite a while. Speaking of Telltale Games, their rendition of Game of Thrones is at number 7. Featuring some characters from the popular mainline story, Telltale's Game of Thrones follows Roderick Forrester, a young squire who's not really sure what's ahead of him. The Forresters support Robb Stark, who has declared himself the King of the North, and House Forrester obviously gets involved supporting them in the ensuing war. Decidedly a little bit less funny than Tales from the Borderlands. In a clever way, Telltale emulates the books and series in setting you up for emotional, world-changing events. Number 6, Armikrog. If you remember the Neverhood, then you know exactly what Armikrog is, as it is the spiritual successor to the Neverhood and developed by the same gentleman. It returns to the point-and-click style of the Neverhood, which Skull Monkeys, if you remember, departed from it for a more platform-like experience. If you're a fan of point-and-click adventure games, this is a big deal. And it definitely makes sense that it was kickstarted for $900,000. This game is on a lot of people's radars, and for a very good reason. Coming in at number 5, King's Quest. If you're old enough to remember the golden age of adventure game, you absolutely remember King's Quest. This series released nothing but classic games from 1984 to 1998. 2015's King's Quest takes the popular episodic video game format a step further. The game will be mostly new stories, but will also reimagine certain events, such as in the first episode. But I will say that this isn't just nostalgia, it's a beautiful adventure game that will likely repopularize the genre. Number 4, Everybody's Gone to the Rapture is a spiritual successor to Dear Esther. It's a first-person adventure game. The plot will be based around 6 characters, each telling their own story, each interconnected with landmarks in the world that will evolve as the game progresses. The developers were inspired by British apocalyptic science fiction from the 1960s and 70s, and set the game in a village in Shropshire. It looks to be a haunting and lonely game, but in the absolute best way. Number 3, Techno Babylon is a cyberpunk adventure game from the studio that brought you Gemini Rue and Blackwell. In 2087, genetic engineering is super normal, and artificial intelligence powers the city. This game is reviewed extremely positively on Steam. The graphics are very reminiscent of old 90s adventure games, except for obviously with a little bit more advancement in technology. It's well-paced, well-written, and the plot involves a deadly conspiracy. It's just about time somebody made a great cyberpunk adventure game. Number 2, Cradle. Cradle is a science fiction first-person quest. The game has a very eclectic art style. It's very bleak and very sci-fi, but oddly enough shows a lot of color in certain areas. The story is built around the relationship of the protagonist and a mechanical girl who have found themselves basically stuck in the desert. The player is tasked with repairing her mechanical body and solving the mystery of the neglected entertainment park located not far from the duo. It looks strange but beautiful in its own way, and it's just such a weird game that looks great. And the number 1 adventure game, Life is Strange. The game has been called very relatable and focuses on a photography student who discovers she has the ability to rewind time at any moment. If you're familiar with the concept of the butterfly effect, and I don't mean the movie, you know exactly where we're going from here. When themes of memory and identity are used to convey a sort of inner struggle, if you love adventure games with a much deeper story and an interesting mechanic, Life is Strange is really worth your time. And I won't follow that up with a pun. If you've played any of these games, do us a favor, leave us a comment, tell us exactly what you thought about it. If we missed any, Of course, share them with us as well. The goal is really just to celebrate a great genre. While you're at it, click the like button as well as subscribe to gameranx. Come back here daily for new videos. We thank you very much for watching this one. We will see you next time.